Prediabetes and diabetes accounts for almost 40% of the US population. I'm actually a type 2 diabetic myself. Pasta is something I usually can't eat. In the US, that's pretty much a no-go for me. Now, when I was in Italy, I ate pasta 5 or 6 times. When I got that G6, it was very eye-opening for me because now I can eat a meal, and after I ate that meal, I would see exactly what happened to my glucose levels. I was starting to get 2, 3, 4, 5 different apps to be able to handle everything that I wanted to do. Why don't they have one, application where you can bring everything together? That was kind of the aha moment for us in creating the company. Apple was making a very big push with this as well to try to create glucose reading technology. I don't think it's there yet, but it's coming.
Matthew, welcome to the show. We're going to dive straight into it. 1 in 10 people, which is 537 million people around the world, suffer from diabetes. The number expected to go to 783 million by 2040. What does that mean, and tell us about yourself?
Well, I think the crazy part about that is that, one, the numbers are staggering, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger part is that there's a lot of personal accountability that comes into that. And I'm not meaning their accountability on themselves, but dealing with diabetes is more you dealing with 90% of it from a self perspective. And looking at that in the grand scheme of things in the US, it's even worse, right? Because prediabetes and diabetes accounts for almost 40% of the US population.
40% of the US population?
Yeah.
And this includes pre-diabetes?
Yeah, that'd be including pre-diabetes.
Okay.
Regular diabetes is about 11 to 12%.
Could we go into what pre-diabetes means?
Yeah, pre-diabetes just means that you have an elevated A1C. And A1C is essentially what a 3-month snapshot of what your glucose levels are. And so once you have an elevated A1C, that means there's predictors that you're going into pre-diabetes, into technical diabetes itself.
I'm curious because, the tracking of diabetes has been relatively new in the last 100 years. I was wondering if you have any insight on how people track diabetes in the olden days, before technology had the mini attachments that they have nowadays. How do they track that?
Yeah, I'm from a farther back standpoint, I don't know, but prior to the CGMs, which is continuous glucose monitors, which is what you're referring to,
Mm-hmm.
actually the wearables that go on you that test your glucose every 5 minutes or so. Prior to that, you had your regular finger stick method, which is your regular glucose meters, which you essentially poke a hole in your finger and pull the blood. Then you put it into a device, and that device gives you that reading. So that's how they've been doing it for quite a long time. The continuous glucose monitors are newer. And when I say newer, I mean within the last 15 years. But they're now becoming a lot more prevalent. There's bigger companies like Dexcom and Abbott who have now moved from the original devices that were aimed and geared towards type 1 to now they have devices that are also geared towards type 2, and they're also non-prescription. The original devices are prescription. Now they have over-the-counter devices that just came out over the last 6-7 months.
And so why do you think that we are seeing more and more people becoming diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
Oh, well, there's that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, let's get into it. We have a couple hours.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple parts of the problem, right? There's, you have your hereditary aspects where it, runs technically in, if as they would say, runs in the family, but you also have, our level of food in the US. I mean, if you really look, go out to any restaurant, how big is your portion size in your meal, right? How many times is that server coming back and just, if you have a soda or a sweet tea or something like that, how many times do they refill your drink when you're there? And more importantly, the food quality in the U.S., there's a lot to be said about that. When you look at, there's a lot of foods that the quality is diminished. There's a lot of additives, preservatives, things like that to prolong the life of foods, which ends up diminishing the actual quality of the food. And there's a lot of different studies on that would show you the negative effects and impacts of that.
And to follow up on that, do you have any insight on whether or not is it just America and their food habits that is causing this increase in diabetic diagnosis, or you see it throughout other countries as well?
So it is more prevalent in the U.S. And it's funny. I actually I went to Paris and France and Italy to say that this year, and one of the things I don't know if you guys know, I'm actually a type 2 diabetic myself. So I of course have to watch what I eat on a regular basis, and pasta is something I usually can't eat. In the U.S., that's pretty much a no-go for me, based on my dietary concerns. Now, when I was in Italy, I must have ate pasta 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And nowhere near did it do what it would do here in the when I eat pasta in the U.S., and whether it's at a restaurant or cooking it at home. I've seen a lot of research and studies that just show it's the quality of preparation of what they're putting into the foods is down in the U.S. as opposed to a lot more in other countries are closer to that farm to table experience where they're making fresh pastas out of fresh ingredients as opposed to it being made out of ultra refined processed flour and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like super, super important. I mean, the concept of pasta in Italy is interesting to talk about in and of itself, right? Because there's 2 types of pasta, right? There's like the pasta that's fresh, and then there's the pasta that we would call to be pasta here, which is the pasta you buy at the store, right? And I think that broadly in either of them, you're typically seeing a different flour being used. Have you heard of that? The difference of flour.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and but something tells me though that it has to be about more than just the flour, right? It could also be the preservatives and the other elements to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, from the studies that I've seen, that has a lot to do with all of the additional things that are put into the food. If you look at, sustaining shelf life and, the different additives and preservatives that they put in to sustain, shelf life in items, I think that there's a relation to that as well.
Yeah, and like my sister is gluten-free. And so, she has also gone to Italy and she does better when she's there than here. It's not even close. Like what you're saying. I mean, we're not just talking like, hey, like I could have pasta once there, but I can't have it here at all. Like you just said you had pasta multiple times and you try to avoid it completely over here. These are like drastic levels of difference. How do you think that we got here to this place?
Capitalism. And it's fair. I think that I think it's part capitalism. I also think it's part of the way that we consume food in the U.S. Right? We are very wasteful in products. I can't tell you how many times, and guilty of this ourselves as families, like how many times have I gone to the grocery store and filled up the fridge, and then a month later I'm throwing out 8 or 9, 10 items that I bought because we just didn't eat them. So I think that part of that is them trying to find that sustained shelf life where things last longer, so that you're like actually making sure that you buy the goods.
Yeah.
But also it's funny that you were saying that, because when I was in France, we just actually me and the family took a trip to France just right here before Thanksgiving, and we went into the grocery stores there, and you would see American cereal boxes, and their warnings on the boxes are crazy. Like they had 5 or 6 different warning labels on the boxes about, all of the bad items that were in those boxes.
And it's so crazy that you say that, because the way that they make those American cereals there are better than the way that they make them
Correct.
here. And yet they still have the warnings. So wait, I didn't know about this. I've never heard of this. So we're talking like a cigarette style label?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I had no clue. So this was in France, you said?
Yes.
Right? Got to check that out. That's amazing.
So if for those that don't really know about diabetes, there's 2 types. There's type 1, type 2. You said you have type 2. Can you explain the difference between those 2?
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
audience?
So you have type 1 diabetes, which is and they both have their hereditary components, but the type 1 diabetes is when you don't have the ability to properly produce insulin, so that now you're insulin dependent. And that's, it's a lot more dangerous, right? Because you're dealing with both highs and lows, as opposed to, type 2 diabetes, where it's a more manageable condition. You can actually have success by eating more properly, intaking less carbs, intaking less sugar, adding exercise into it, and you can impact it a lot more because you're not insulin dependent. So it just makes it's a lot different in the way that you manage it, but also it's a lot different in the way that you're able to sustain your lifestyle with it as well.
So what's like the added day-to-day stuff that you need to do to monitor what your glucose level is for a diabetic person?
Yeah. So, and that actually varies, by the actual person. Being that a good example is like what we talked about with the continuous glucose monitors, right? Most people that have type 2 diabetes, a lot of them never even heard what a continuous glucose monitor is, right? Most of them are still in the days of, doing the actual glucose meters where you're, taking it, pricking your finger and, putting the reading in.
Right.
And a lot of times they're checking their blood sugar 1, 2, 3 times a day max. Whereas, if you're wearing that continuous glucose monitor, you actually see those readings every 5 minutes. Managing your diabetes on a regular basis is very interesting in your pathway yourself, right? Because being fair, like I have a brother that has type 2 diabetes where, he doesn't, not that he doesn't manage it, but he doesn't follow it as tightly as I do, right? And it's because of how he was trained, not because of him. It's more because of how he was trained from his physicians. He's had it longer. So his, idea was always, just, hey, I'll test my blood sugar once or twice a day. I'll try to eat better and do a little bit better. Where me, on the other side of that, from the earlier stages of me being diagnosed with diabetes, I was actually introduced to a continuous glucose monitor because I had a healthcare, my healthcare actually offered it to me for free. And once I went onto one, I never wanted to go back because I get to see data and what it looks like all the time. But managing it every day, I mean, it does, require eating properly, making sure that you're eating less carbs, eating less sugar, you're staying hydrated and drinking a lot of water, adding exercise throughout the day. But even more importantly, if you add exercise after meals, that actually helps a lot. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but there's also the fact that a lot of everybody that has diabetes might respond to food differently. So for example, if we all had it, you might be able to eat an apple and it does, barely does anything to your glucose levels, where I ate an apple and it, might end up sending me into a spike, depending on, how your actual body responds to certain foods.
That level of kind of individual intricacy is very interesting from like a consumer technology perspective, because it makes me feel like there could be like quite an opening here for, AI assisted products that are able to, sift through this data, something that's utilizing machine learning and is able to kind of look at these individual data trends and provide that kind of personalized service. I mean, maybe you've seen this in what you're working on for DiabeticU, but, throughout the industry, is this something that has caught on so far?
It's catching on now. There are, I would say this, that any company that is in the diabetes space, or even just healthcare in general, if you're not taking those steps into deeper AI, then you're falling behind immediately. And you're exactly right, that especially in the diabetes center, and of course in a lot of the different healthcare sectors, that personalization is, you have the ability to look at trend analysis, predictive analysis, and things like that when it really comes into tying into, little things like that, like how you respond to certain foods, how, you respond to exercise and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels similar to like genetic analysis that, a lot of, celebrities or, wealthier people would do, right? And that they would be able to kind of see the way that, their genes are and what they would expect their children to be. And, maybe we're not at the point where Gattaca is like becoming real yet.
Close.
But it feels like we're getting there. And this is just another kind of example, I would say, of like how these personalized healthcare solutions are going to basically run, the next generation of healthcare tech.
I was wondering what gaps in the industry before you started DiabeticU pushed you along this journey to start this venture?
Yeah, I would say it was 100% personalization, right? What really drove me is I got that. So I was put onto the Dexcom G6. Now they're on the G7. So I was on a Dexcom G6, and this was probably about 4 years ago. And prior to going onto it, remember with the Dexcom G6, you're able to see that data, you see your glucose levels every 5 minutes. But prior to that, I was doing the normal finger stick method, and being honest, I was bad at it. Like I would forget to do it. I'd probably do it once, maybe twice a day, sometimes none a day. So you weren't really seeing how things impacted you, or what your glucose levels really were. So when I got that G6, it was very eye-opening for me because now I can eat a meal, and after I ate that meal, I would see exactly what happened to my glucose levels. But what was more interesting to me is I used to test in the morning, right? One of the things they tell you to always test your fasting glucose levels in the morning, right? And then after meals. So I would test my fasting, and some days it would be 105, some days it would be 120, sometimes it'd be 110 or 140. So it was like, but what I didn't realize is that it's always going like this, right? So the difference in a 105 and a 130 could mean 7 minutes apart, right? So you don't, and not knowing that, I could, if I'm just testing by a finger prick, I was like, oh, well, wow, that I was doing pretty good today. But in the reality of it is actually I was, going like this most of the time. So seeing that data was like, wow, okay, I need more. Now the data was good, but I didn't completely understand everything that I was seeing. So it was more like, okay, well, how can we take this to the next step? How can I start to educate myself and learn more? And so I started looking for different technologies to pair it with. So I had that device. So, okay, what can I pair this with to, get better insights? And that's when I started to look around, and there wasn't a lot. I mean, there's apps out there, but every app that I get, it felt like I was starting to get 2, 3, 4, 5 different apps to be able to handle everything that I wanted to do, whether it was getting meal plans, whether it was understanding my data and connecting my data, whether it was logging, the information and things that I was doing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm all over the place here. Why don't they have one technology, one, application where you can bring everything together? See, you get meal plans, get everything together so I can get the readings and be able to, decide or see how everything I'm doing is impacting me, get education. So that was kind of the aha moment for us in creating the company.
And how long did it take for you to compile all these features that you found was limiting from other apps? You said there's exercise, dieting, recipes, and tracking of glucose. That's linked to your device. Like how long did this take in general?
So from concept, we started out from the idea in about the beginning of 2022, and really started to like, okay, well, the aha moment came, and the typical pen to paper. Let's start configuring the idea, what this would look like. Let's start researching the market, all that. We started doing that, and that was about 9 months. And it was like, okay, well, what would this actually look like? What all would we offer within the technology? And then we got to a place where it was like, okay, well, we would like to do meal plans, right? We want to be able to get meal plans and recipes and exercise options. We want to have education, because that was the biggest thing that I lacked in the beginning. It's okay, what am I dealing with? What do I eat? What are the things that I'm supposed to do? And you would think that in this world of technology, like it's so easy to go Google it. But the problem is there's so much conflicting information on Google that it just gets overwhelming and confusing. So, and then we're like, okay, well, education. Okay, well, okay, now how are we going to import the data in there? What data are we going to look at? How are we going to personalize that data? So once we started doing that, then it was like, okay, we kind of went into a wireframing. So we brought on a UX UI person that helped us with the wireframing. And so we built out wireframing. And then we're like, okay, well, now that I think we did about 30, 40 screens overall of, what the journey was like for the user. Like you said, they start here, they onboard, these are the different screens, these are the different, functions and features that we have. Once we had that, and we're like, all right, we need to validate this, right? You can't just, all right, it sounds great, but let's see what the user base, thinks. So we put together a video of, all the wireframes and, what as a company we were going to do. And we just started advertising. We took out social media ads and basically had people pre-sign up. We had a little link in the pre-sign up. Once they pre-signed up, it automatically fired off a questionnaire and a survey. And within, I think, about 3 weeks of us advertising, right, we had about 1,000 people that pre-signed up. And with that, we had about 400 or 500 people that actually filled out the survey, which was like, oh wow, that's from 1,000 to 400 and something. That was actually great, and we just started getting the market and seeing that the market really needed this.
Validating before you actually spent the time and the money to create the technology, I think is brilliant. I think especially with an app like yours, we downloaded a free trial on the app, the premium version. It's free, but we did the free trial for the premium version, and there are so many different features to it. There's the recipes, which are excellent, by the way. The way that the recipes look, honestly, I think you should call up whoever is the product manager at Food Network app and be like, hey man, I have a better version of this for you, because it looks better than the vast majority of the recipe apps that I've used. Just super easy to follow. The design is excellent. The UI UX is really great. You have a lot of things on there and it doesn't look cluttered, which I think is important as well. I guess if we could elaborate more though on that decision to be able to get the feedback from your users before you actually found the tech partner. I think that would be really important, because you're a non-technical founder, right?
100%.
So, okay. So you did all that. When did you know then that it was the right time to, invest the time and money into making the actual application?
Yeah, so I think it goes to again, exactly what you're saying, was that validation was so important. When you're developing, I guess, anything, and taking that back a step, like me absolutely having zero tech experience whatsoever, the most important part was I needed to understand the market. I understand it from a patient side, and I think that's where I saw the biggest challenges with the products that were on the market. Either they weren't doing everything in one technology, but the other side of that is it seemed like everything that's out there was built from a clinical side and not taking in the user's perspective in the development. And that's where, me coming from the other side, I feel like made that bigger difference. Is like, okay, I'm the end user. I understand what my challenges are, but I need to validate my challenges with other end users just like myself. And we really wanted to develop this, our product, from the user perspective, taking the user journey in mind. What's going to help me as the end user manage my diabetes better, or our diabetes better in general? So that validation was, we really did, that surveying. We went through all of our features. We asked a lot of questions in our survey, like, how do you manage your diabetes right now? How well do you feel like you're managing? Do you use any technologies in your diabetes management? If not, would you be open to use technologies? If you were using technologies, here's a list of feature sets. Would any of these feature sets be beneficial to you? And so we would list all of our feature sets in there. And of course we had you could check them individually or all of the above, things like that. So we surveyed quite extensively. And then once we started to see the feedback on that, it was actually overwhelming. We were shocked. From a personal level, I knew that problem existed for me, but it was eye-opening to see that everybody that responded, we had about an 80% answer of, I don't manage well, was in the 70+% that I don't feel like I'm managing my diabetes well. We had that I would definitely utilize technology, and all these features would be beneficial. And it was either, I think we had like 60% that were all of the above, and then at least 85 that were at least 60-70% of the features.
And you said you wanted to educate. Like, what aspects of your education in your app did you provide to these end users?
So we have two different areas of education, and that was important to us. I've done a lot of research on attention span, how people learn. Of course, you guys know you're in the technology world. Most people watch videos a max of, I think it was like 49 seconds was the finite number, but it's usually between 45 seconds and a minute max. So one of our areas in our technology is called bite-sized lessons. All of our videos and bite-sized lessons are impactful videos, of different tips, tricks, or areas of diabetes education that are impactful for people with diabetes. But they're all under a minute. Everything is 45 seconds to a minute. I mean, we might have a couple that maybe a minute and 2 seconds or 3 seconds, but we try to keep everything in that short form version. We're actually working on algorithms that will change out those videos based on where you're at in your health journey, as well as where you're at in your health literacy, to help you, continue to, build and grow as you're going through your health journey with diabetes.
It feels like attention span would also be really, important in the context of age, right? So, we're talking about education. I mean, this is what, on our channels, we try to educate people as well. But we notice that there's a difference between educating someone who's in college and someone who's, just out of college, and then also somebody who's been, working for 20, 30 years and at different stages of life. And so I think that that's something that you could also consider when you're doing these kind of algorithmic changes, is like, hey, you could swap out this lesson because it's more likely to, attract someone who's younger versus that one. Because unfortunately, I think there is a correlation of age to attention span. And it's interesting. I don't think that correlation would probably involve, a lack of education. In fact, Gen Z, or lack of interest in education. In fact, Gen Z reads more words per day than any other generation. And that includes, captions on Netflix and everything that's scrolling on their phone. And so, kind of understanding that, I feel like, is also super relevant here. I guess a follow-up question based on that is then thinking, have you thought about the way that you can market this to people of different age groups? Because the app is definitely intuitive for anyone now, but you know how it is. Perhaps it's better to be as customized as possible.
Yeah, we haven't gone into that yet, just because of the research and development dollars that would take,
Of course.
and where we're at in our span. But that would definitely be something in that it's on our radar.
I'm curious because one of your features is of the GPL, the glucose tracking, is partnered or connected to devices. How did you make that relationship with these device makers happen?
Yeah, that was the most important thing, in our technology. And being fair, Dexcom was the reason that I'm even here right now, because of me getting their device and having that aha moment. So that was clear from day one of us having this technology, that we wanted to import all the wearable devices, and that, because at the end of the day, data is everything, right? The more data that we get, and it's not us getting data as a company, but the more data that comes in to your, portfolio and your app, you're able to start seeing a lot more insights that really show you how all of the things that you're doing are affecting you. And with something like diabetes, there's so many factors that affect your glucose levels, right? So when you look at, of course, what you're eating, when and how you're taking your medication, when and how you're exercising, how you're sleeping, how your stress levels are, all of those things, affect that. So that was very important for us for that data. We really sought out to create that relationship. Our first, contact was with Dexcom, and then we found a great partner in a company called Validic that actually aggregates all of those devices directly in through us. So they were able to, they actually have all the relationships with all of the different fitness wearables and digital weight scales and things like that. So we connect through, an API that we're able to pull all that data in from.
And so did you have to make a decision to only work with one or two of those manufacturers? Or are you trying to be as, diverse as possible in terms of all of them?
Yeah, no, we are 100% going to be device agnostic. That is our goal. We will have essentially down the road preferred vendors that, whether we create a package, when we're creating this, we create a package that might include certain devices with the actual product. But with that being said, we'll always be device agnostic. Like I said, right now we have a partnership with Dexcom. We're actually a Dexcom Health Apps partner on their website as well. But we're also bringing on the Abbott devices as well, which is, technically their competitor. But the reality of it is we want to make sure that any user within our platform is able to get the same experience no matter what they have, right? And that's more of the goal. Our goal is to cater to the person living with type 2 diabetes.
And I'm curious because both of us, we're not diabetics. We have close friends that are, and family members that are. I was wondering, how many devices are there in the market right now that are, typically used that, you would have to eventually put DiabeticU in partner with?
from the diabetes space, I mean, you only really need one device, whether it's, you know, the Dexcom or a glucose meter or one of the Abbott devices as well that are all continuous glucose monitors. But where, like, you know, for us, you know, we, I guess to give you a perspective, we're putting together a package where it'll include, you know, whether it be your CGM, your monthly CGMs, a digital weight scale, and a fitness wearable, as well as potentially looking at including an Oura ring or something like that involved in it as well. And the reason that we're looking at that is because, one, all of those different data points make a big difference, right? Being able to see that, like, for a person living with diabetes, if I can see how I'm eating, when I exercise, you know, when I'm stressed, even more importantly, how I slept, and then now going back into what you were talking about earlier, adding machine learning into that and the AI component, we're able to, you know, take all those data points and then really look at how, from a personal level, all the things you're doing are affecting you, from a positive and negative, right? But even more importantly, the positive, and be able to reinforce positive behavior based on, you know, what you're seeing in trends. So, you know, there are, you know, I think we're getting to the point where it's like you're looking at like the Samsung Ring and things like that, where it could be just one device, right? Whereas like you're now having in a ring, a fitness tracker, stress, you know, stress, sleep, all those different things in one device. So it might just be one or two or three different devices max.
And so, like, what are some form factor innovations that are happening? You know, because this was a big shift to even get to the point where there was, you know, constant glucose monitoring. And, you know, are there any new updates from like a hardware or form factor? You know, we're mentioning software updates like AI, machine learning application, you know, the utilization of personal data. That's great. But, you know, I feel like there could be an X factor here in terms of, you know, perhaps something that's maybe even less invasive. You know, I don't know if you've heard of anything.
Yeah. So there's that. I think that's the big push right now, especially from the CGM perspective, that continuous glucose monitor perspective, is that they're looking at ways to make this non-invasive. I don't know, Apple was making a very big push with this as well to try to create in their watch glucose reading technology. I don't think it's there yet, but it's coming. You know, it definitely is coming. There's a lot of different hardwares that are testing right now in the market that are all non-invasive glucose testing. Whether it's, you know, from a watch, a band, a ring, a lot of companies are working on that right now. I don't think it's there yet, but you know, I believe within the next 5 to 10 years you will see something of that. I mean, because even with just so you know, even with like the continuous glucose monitor that you're wearing, when you know, stick it in, there's a little, you know, it's almost like the size of a piano wire or a fishing string that, you know, actually sticks into your body.
Right. And like Matthew, I would honestly, I would try to get ahead of this if I was you.
Oh,
because this is really going to be a massive benefit, I would say. I mean, like we've said, we're not diabetic, right? But I just, as a human, right, the concept of, you know, something going into your body, you know, that doesn't feel too great every day does not sound like it's a positive user experience, right? And Absolutely. It feels like there's something that would definitely be here. We did an on-site interview with somebody who actually is making a brainwave technology. Shout out CQ, Enchanted Wave. You know, that company, we were able to see our brainwaves from just putting it wasn't even a helmet. It was like a little bit like a
headband strap. Yeah.
Yeah, basically a headband strap. And that's something that was not possible, you know, very recently. And then we were even in his interview comparing him to Neuralink and, you know, Elon Musk. And, you know, CQ just said, hey, maybe Elon doesn't need to put things inside people's brains, but he wants to, you know? And so I think we're going to see how all of this works. But I think from that interview, and this was just a natural thought I had right now, it feels like non-invasive healthcare technology would be the future here, just from a nice user experience standpoint. It's not like we're really reinventing the wheel. It just, do you want, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, like, do you want to get pricked or do you not? You know, like that's kind of it, you know? So yeah, it's just, let's try to be ahead of that. We'd love to continue to do another follow-up episode once you figure that out, because that's going to be excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, that I think that's where even looking at the continuous glucose monitors, that's where the big value, and not only do you get the readings every 5 minutes, but you went from you're going from having to actually stick a needle in your finger 2 or 3 times a day to, okay, I have to do it once, every 10 days, 10, 12 days. Now, agree with you 100%. When you can get to that non-invasive aspect, that changes everything, because who wouldn't just toss on a watch or a ring that you're getting the same effect on?
And people that don't even have diabetes would be interested in tracking this. I mean, we're in the Brian Johnson generation. We're in the what is his movement called? Don't Die. Yeah, his movement is literally called Don't Die. We're in the Don't Die movement era. People are going to look into this. We'll see how long that lasts. I'm not too sure. People are going to want to be self-obsessed over that for too long of a time. But at this exact moment, that's certainly where we are, and people are going to be interested in checking that out. So that's probably a way to even expand your market beyond just diabetics as well.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
And you said there's metrics that you track from the devices that you have. Do you have any elaborations in terms of showing how people, for example, if they've said 6 o'clock, if they eat at 6 o'clock, they spike. Do you have any recommendations for these users through your AI forms or whatnot?
So we aren't there yet. What we are doing is, so our technology that we've talked about is only the first piece of the puzzle for us. We're now actually in the process of creating a telehealth component. So our goal overall is personalization of care, right? Is really personalizing the healthcare experience for somebody living with diabetes. So when we create the telehealth component, we're now going to be able to pair our users with a certified diabetes educator and a registered dietitian nutritionist who are utilizing that data to hyper-personalize their experience. So they'll be able to look at that data and say, okay, well, we noticed that you're working out an average of 22 minutes a day. But we noticed that maybe you're working out in that 22 minutes is you're doing a 22-minute walk in the morning, but your heavier carb load is after lunch. If there's possibility of you shifting some of that, walk or, maybe a 10, 15-minute walk after your lunch, that'll help, lower your glucose levels. So really pairing that with the clinical side. Now we're also in the background working on artificial intelligence components that would be able to spot those trends as well, and then make suggestions as well. So for example, like if you would be somebody that, what we're working on in the background would be like if maybe you ate white rice 3 or 4 times over the last month. Well, we can, look at those trends from a AI perspective and say, all right, well, hey, we've noticed that you've eaten white rice 3 or 4 times over the last month. Every time that you've eaten white rice, your glucose went 22% higher than it normally does. Try switching that out with quinoa or brown rice and see what happens. That is something we're working on, but there's a lot of clinical aspects that tie into that as well, that you have to make sure that you're getting that right, that the science is there, that it isn't just something just because you can predict it doesn't mean you want to make suggestions until you know those suggestions are backed by science and clinical.
Okay.
And do you work with specific institutions for these clinical studies, or?
We haven't yet. That's actually our next step that we're doing now. The first part was developing the technology. We just finished the technology this year. And now we're at the part where now it's going into market and bringing in the clinical studies and trials and things like that.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
Do you think that people would rather speak to a registered dietitian or speak to a chatbot about these issues?
I would definitely say they would rather speak to an actual dietitian, which is why we're adding the telehealth component.
Well, I'll just give a personal example. Yeah. So, like I said, we downloaded the app, right? And I really wanted to test it, Matthew. So I gave it a pretty difficult prompt, I would say. I said, it's lunchtime. I need some energy. However, I am feeling, okay. It's lunchtime. I need some energy. However, I do not want to crash in an hour, right? Can you recommend some specific dishes? And it recommended, very simply, chicken and vegetables. It said if you're a vegetarian, you can have, tofu. And I was just really, this isn't the best description of the prompt. We'll maybe be able to say what the prompt is offline. But I was really impressed with the response. And I felt like what I was impressed with was that there was very low friction in that process. It was really simple. I could already tell from the way that the app looked, that it was a very reputable application and that you all knew what you were doing. And it took me 10 to 15 seconds to think of how I hypothetically would be feeling. And I got a really great answer from it. And I just thought to myself, like, is this the future of healthcare? Because for me, yes, obviously, registered dietitian, you want to speak to a human. A lot of people want to do that. However, for someone like us, I would say, like Leon and I, we're running around all day. We're running this business. You're doing these interviews. You have a million things to do. We're handling all the commitments that we have. Maybe I don't particularly have the time to speak to a registered dietitian. Maybe I would prefer to speak to a chatbot. And also, wait, it's not just any chatbot, right? This is a customized chatbot that's within a reputable firm like yours. Have you received that feedback maybe from anyone else?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, that was part of the goal in the creation of that, right? So our chatbot's called DiabeticU. It's just, for our company. But the goal with that was knowing that for somebody living with diabetes, right, you are with a clinician, less than 1% of your life, your life, and no matter what, whether it's doctor visit, whether it's a follow-up, a checkup, or meeting with a dietitian or meeting with a certified diabetes educator, it's very minimal time. You need decisions, you're making decisions 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day that affect your lifestyle and your diabetes. So we wanted to make it, give the possibility for somebody that, if I don't have access to go ask a dietitian every time I'm out, right? And we create meal and exercise plans, but the reality of it is, how often do you follow a plan, right? I follow plans pretty well. I might follow my meal plan, and I do the DiabeticU meal plan, right? I might follow it 60% of the time. Why? I have kids, I have a family, there's extenuating circumstances all the time that change what my day looks like, plus I'm an entrepreneur. So even if I had a plan to eat X for lunch and then eat this for dinner, well, I might've got a call that I had to go somewhere else and I had a lunch meeting. Okay, well, for now I have a lunch meeting and I can't eat this for lunch anymore. What do I do when I'm out? So that was the real goal, is to be able to, help provide that assistance and those options when you're out and about. And we're really working on, refining that to be as strong as possible. Like we actually want to really hone it in to where it's like, hey, and I'm out, I have to go to McDonald's. I want to eat a Big Mac and French fries. What can I do to lessen the impact on my glucose level, right? Because part of this is not only do you have people that aren't following the plans, but the reality of it is everybody's human. Or even me, I'm gonna throw myself out there. I'll probably get in trouble for this one, but I had Burger King today for lunch, right? It wasn't because technically it was like in my mind, hey, I'm gonna eat Burger King today. But before this, I actually had another meeting down in Miami, and I was there, and I wasn't gonna drive all the way down to South Miami, drive all the way back to home, and then come here. So it's like, all right, well, I'll just spend time down here in Miami until I come to do the podcast. And when I was looking for stuff to eat in Miami, I ended up getting on a phone call. I was on a business phone call for too long, and I was like, oh man, I don't have enough time to go sit down and eat. All right, well, I have to make a choice. So being able to, utilize the technology to find a better way, or hey, what can I do to lessen the impact and have it help me make a decision, makes it that much better.
And to follow up on that, in terms of, like you said, you have to adapt to your daily routine. Apps like yours needs to be seamlessly integrated into everyday life. When you were telling the technical people when designing this app, what things were you asking them to do and provide you in this app to help make it more of a seamless process for these users?
User experience, user experience, user experience, user experience. That's what we focused on. We knew that they could solve the technical part, right? And so the biggest goal was, how can I make this as user-friendly as possible? How can I make this fit into my daily routine and not feel cumbersome? For people living with diabetes, one of the important things is to log what you eat, right? You'll ask any clinician, when you go back and see them, they'll always ask like, okay, what have you been eating? How are you eating? How are you exercising? So important is, logging that. Well, that's cumbersome. I'm not going to sit down and write everything that I had every single day, keep a journal, then take that journal in and be like, hey, doc, let's go through this journal for 20 minutes, right? That's not realistic. So our goals have been like, okay, how can we make logging as simple as possible? So that's what's part of our AI virtual assistant, where you can just press on the button and say, hey, I just had, 2 eggs and a couple pieces of bacon for breakfast. Can you log that at 9:30 a.m.? Or, hey, I just went for a 15-minute walk. Can you log that? To be able to do those, certain things that really focus on the user experience.
And so thinking about user experience, something that also sticks out to me about your app is that there's a lot going on in it. And as I mentioned before, I think you did a great job with the UX because it doesn't feel overwhelming. However, as a CEO myself, and I have a question for you as a fellow CEO, sometimes you have to think about your focus and your strategic focus for the clients that you're looking to seek out. There's definitely perhaps an ease of marketing a very simple singular solution, right? Like the AI chatbot for those with diabetes, or the AI chatbot for those that are seeking to live a healthier lifestyle as one app, or the best app for recipes for people with diabetes or people worried about their sugar levels. You have thought though to put it all into one, right? Do you ever have any feelings about, hey, what would happen if I tried to isolate one of these components, and maybe that would be easier perhaps to market, and then using that to kind of build out something bigger from there? Or is it so essential to your process that it's all in one place that was the main feedback that you got?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest part of it was, of course, that was the issue I went through. If we really rewind back in time, I found myself using 4 or 5 different applications to be able to handle my diabetes, right? So it was like, okay, well, I'm using X for a meal plan. I'm using this to, for education. I'm using this to get my levels and understand, what all the things that I'm doing are, how it impacts me. And that's just cumbersome, right? So the goal, one, was to bring everything into one place, but then tie in the clinical aspects so it really personalizes the healthcare experience. And I think that, the technology is great. And of course, we, even as our organization, focus on the technology piece of it, but it's not the technology that is our platform. It's the whole experience. Where we want to go is technically DiabeticU Total Care, where it's the total care experience of personalized healthcare with your certified diabetes educators, with your registered dietitian nutritionist, tied in with your primary care providers and your endocrinologists, that are all working together with the data that you're providing to help personalize your plan and create better lifestyle changes for you down the road.
And in terms of the venture perspective, do you think down the line you would open this up to more than just diabetics in terms of starting to compete with, MyFit? Was that MyFit?
Yeah, MyFitnessPal or any of those
MyFitnessPal
other fitness
and
apps.
other ones? Because you have a really, like we said, like the recipes are really good. Like tracking is very top of the line. So do you have any visions to expand away from just the diabetics?
Oh, absolutely. The first area that we would expand into is weight loss. And the reason being is that, one, we have a lot of feature sets that are, definitely advantageous to weight loss as well. And, of course, with some small tweaks and a facelift, we can actually put in another app on the market that was just geared towards weight loss and have a lot of the same features. But yeah, so the answer to that is yes. And we've been looking into multiple different ways for that.
So let's talk about weight loss then. Ozempic, all the other GLP-1 drugs, they have had a massive impact, not just on healthcare, not just on the medical technology field. They've had a massive impact on global society, not even just American society. We are seeing a massive shift in the way that people are thinking about how medicine could affect their day-to-day lives. How have you thought about this as a healthcare technology CEO?
I think it's wonderful. The GLP-1s are, from what we've seen so far, and it's still early on, right? There's still going to be long-term studies and things like that will open up and maybe change perspective or have a shift in what the market actually is for those. But the reality of it is what you're seeing right now is great reductions in A1C, which is your 3-month glucose levels, and also heavy reductions in weight loss. I'm of the old school mind of I am not a major proponent of long-term medication, right? I believe that lifestyle changes are the most important thing to look at when you're having, any type of issues. If you can change something by lifestyle changes and use less medication, it's just better for you in the long run. I've never seen any medication that doesn't come with a disclaimer of, hey, X, Y, and Z happens, and then you do this, and. But the reality of it is they have been fantastic. Where we look is to be right along the side of your GLP-1s. Somebody using a GLP-1 could use our technology, right, to enhance and create a more healthier lifestyle, so that not only are you getting the effects of a great GLP-1 and that reducing your A1C, reducing your weight, but also you're starting to make lifestyle changes that in the long term make it even more sustainable.
I'm curious, what does Ozempic like? That's been like the trend for not just diabetics. People are abusing it, or like celebrities. You see celebrities using Ozempic. What does it do? Like I keep hearing it. We see advertisements and on TV about it. Like, do you have any insight of what it does?
So being a non-clinical founder, I will answer it that way first.
Okay.
But the reality of it is it's, one, it is great for reduction in A1C, which is, of course, your long-term glucose levels, but it's also been fantastic in weight loss. And, if you look at glucose levels in general, you're going to, right now you have a lot of technologies on the market, like Levels and NutriSense and different companies like that are actually just using glucose as health wellness. Not even, these are companies that aren't tied into diabetes at all. They're using it to, show people, how their glucose also affects their regular wellness, their regular, their activity levels and their, things like that. But with that being said, like, the GLP-1s, I mean, you're seeing why you see that big, I guess, demand for it is because of the weight loss aspect of it, right? You're seeing that weight loss on a GLP-1 is far, like, is percentage-wise is so much higher than you've ever seen with anything else, right? So, that's why it makes sense for people that are, not non-diabetic, that they're jumping all over this as well. I mean, I actually have friends that I've seen that are, not diabetic, but utilizing it and shedding 20, 30 pounds.
And do you think that's beneficial for, like, for example, if you look at insulin, there's a shortage of insulin because there's only, I think, 3 major suppliers, manufacturers of it. And do you think if you don't have diabetes and you're kind of taking Ozempic in the long term, there'll be a shortage of this for the diabetics?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to that. And there could be that aspect, but you also look at the level of prediabetes and diabetes that's associated, with what you eat and how you're eating. Of course, you have the genetic aspect of it as well, but you also have, the food aspect of, whether it's overeating, whether it's, eating the wrong type of foods. From what GLP-1s are doing, they actually limit what you're eating as well. So people on GLP-1s eat less than they normally do. So I think in the long run, that is actually a benefit. And I think that in the long run, even if you see people that are doing it just for weight loss, that might curve the level of prediabetes in the country as well.
So there's like a preventative approach to
Essentially,
using
it is
Ozempic as well. Yeah, I don't even think that most people realize actually that Ozempic and the other GLP-1 drugs were initially developed to be diabetes, anti-diabetes drugs. So I guess that's like a really interesting component. I do have a question from your perspective on marketing, right? Have you thought about how, Ozempic, as I mentioned before, is like a cultural phenomenon. I'm just gonna say this. My dad might get upset, but my father was at he's not on any of the GLP-1 drugs, but a lot of his friends are. So he was at a pre-Thanksgiving dinner with his friends. This is a New Jersey Italian man hanging out with other New Jersey Italian men, and he was there with his friends, and they have this dinner the night before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving, you eat a lot of Thanksgiving, but they're also hanging out the night before. So it was meant to be a good time, kind of recap, holiday dinner, or whatever. They do it every year, him and his friends. He said that this year, the entire conversation for the whole night, for nearly 2 hours, was about how each of them was on a different GLP-1 drug and how well it was working for them. Actually, for one guy, it wasn't working very well, but the whole discussion was about that. So I guess like from your side, right? Like you are also developing a technology that's related to medical world, right? Have you taken any notes on just like how they've been able to become so culturally relevant? Like I even saw a list of like the top brands of 2024 recently. It's the end of the year now. And Ozempic was on the top 10, the top new brands of 2024, because it's a brand that nobody knew very recently and now is a household name. We're talking about it on this show. People even know a random acronym. People even know what GLP-1 means. And that's crazy too. I don't think anybody knows what it stands for. I don't even think I know what it stands for. But have you taken any notes on how they've been able to do that from like a branding perspective?
Yeah, and it's funny. We actually looked at that pretty deeply. That I think where the phenomenon is though is the reality came from the results were so staggering that the world had to take notice. And that's hard to replicate, right? I mean, how often does that happen in any brand, in any industry where, it's results driven and the results are so great that it becomes a phenomenon. And, if you really look at where that gets deeper is what is one of the biggest areas of, I guess, attention in the U.S., right? It's weight loss.
Yeah.
Right. How many weight loss systems do you have out there? How many technologies or companies are focused on better health and weight loss? And that's their entire business model. And then take that a step further. How many average Americans are going to the gym? It's January 1st. What happens? Right?
Everyone signs up for the gym membership.
Gym memberships skyrocket, right? January 1st, but by, March and April, they're still paying for them, but attendance at the gym is, probably, at 20% of what it was, when January 1st hit. So, with that, I think part of that is like, what is the challenges of, actually, keeping your health? It's consistency. I have to go to the gym. I have to eat better. I have to do all these things. Whereas the GLP-1 takes all of that out of the equation, right? I don't have to go to the gym. I don't have to technically eat better because it's almost forcing me to. I'm eating less, and I'm not eating as bad, right? And I'm losing weight. So it solves a lot of the kind of normal conditions of your everyday American. And I think that just in itself created a massive phenomenon. I mean, it's like, think about like all of those people that would normally go and spend all that money at the gym were like, hold on, I can go and do this without going to the gym. I mean, that's hard to replicate.
What are your thoughts? Because, the reliance of these medications cause people, like you said, to have no motivation to actually change their lifestyle. And I'm not sure of the studies of what comes after you get off these medications. Do you go straight back to your usual lifestyle, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I'm a big proponent of lifestyle change, first off.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that, I think when you talk about lifestyle changes, most people think of a lifestyle change as I have to change everything in my life. It's not realistic, right? And I think that becomes one of the larger challenges with any platform that's focused on lifestyle changes. And, most people think about that as like, oh, well, you're saying lifestyle, so I have to change my lifestyle. But the reality of it is no, you really don't have to, right? Because your lifestyle is always going to be your lifestyle. And it's almost, in a sense, challenging to try to tell somebody like, hey, I get you're living this way right now, but you got to come way over here. And now your lifestyle is X, right? Because I might have a family. I might have, kids, what drives part of my lifestyle. So learning to make behavior modifications and small lifestyle changes that become bigger over time, I think is more realistic. But going back so being that I'm such a proponent of lifestyle changes, I do see that we have to see where those long-term effects come, right? Because that's one thing we haven't seen technically with the GLP-1s because it's been such a big craze. What happens when you get off, right? I know they have short studies on that, but do they have the long studies? Are you on a medication forever? Or when you stop that medication, a year later, are you back at 80% of the weight that you were at before. Those are the things that are remain to be seen. And that's why, we always look at trying to be that complement alongside of it. Like, okay, yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic that you're taking this GLP-1 and it's helping. Now let's work on some small behavior modifications that also now take you to the next level.
So how does DiabeticU at the moment account for the taking of these medications? Does it draw data from that as well, or?
So we have medication management within the platform. However, there's not a component that is adjusting their behavior based on the medications they're taking. That is actually something that we're working on. That's a little bit of a heavier lift. Yeah. But we will definitely get there. But I think the more important part is just adding those behavior modifications in is no matter what helpful along the process. And the more that you can tweak, small behaviors, the better it becomes in the long run.
I would agree that small behavior tweaking is definitely important. Although at the same time, I think what we've seen is that people are honestly not even worried as much about the long form education component here. If we think about what we were just speaking about, there's these GLP-1 drugs that are doing so well right now. They're seeing the magic of it all, right? And it feels like the marketing of the drugs, in addition to the way that people are talking about them, leaves out the concept of, hey, we don't know what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now, right? And so I guess it would be interesting for me if I was you to think about, okay, how much education do I actually need to provide here, right? Well, there's two sectors here, right? You should, if you have it, provide all of the information possible. However, for them currently, they don't have the information, and yet it doesn't seem like the consumer cares as much. I think generally in healthcare, we've probably actually seen this a lot, especially since COVID. I think people are just willing to kind of be on whatever track that is really kind of relevant at the time. And so, moving this into the future now, how can you use that to think about where you're going to be moving forward? Because yes, education is important, but also, frankly, just getting the word out there could also be important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, messaging becomes one of the most important things you have as an organization. And that messaging always changes over time based on, what is in front of you as far as the landscape and the industry that you're in. And with us, of course, GLP-1s is at the forefront of every conversation that you're in right now, whether it's at home and with family, like in your father's case, or even, in the industry as well. Like we go to all the different industry conferences, and GLP-1s is, a very, very hot topic. I mean, at this point, it might take second to AI, but not by much. So, understanding what you can do better from an educational perspective, I think is very important. That's something we've been really trying to focus on, just because of the fact that we are looking at us being a complement to somebody also that is taking a GLP-1. Listen, not everybody has access to a GLP-1. So of course we're trying to help those people as much as possible. But even if you're on a GLP-1, we're trying to help, be that conduit to getting you to the next level as well.
So we've compared the US system to the international system a bit today. Do you know if, I'll just call it this, the weight loss industrial complex is something that is still relevant, as much abroad as it is here? Because it just feels like, as we were saying before, it's a massive topic of conversation in the United States always. There's Weight Watchers, there's so many different programs. It is at least a bit a part of our cultural fabric. And I think that that's super important. Americans typically do want to lead healthier lifestyles. It's actually it feels like there's a conundrum here that, I maybe haven't discovered until this exact moment, which is that people here do seem to generally care about being healthier. There's the food pyramid, everyone's aware of it. And it almost feels like perhaps we're always pushed, though, because of a lifestyle, to maybe make decisions that are against that. And I'll just think once again about, Leon and I's situation here. We've totally had fast food multiple times over the past few weeks, where we really shouldn't have had to, because of the fact that we're just running around doing so many things. And so how can we think about, do you have a process for thinking about intentional lifestyle change in terms of how you can really advocate for the amount of time that you can spend, making yourself live a healthy lifestyle, especially when it's super relevant to someone who's diabetic?
Yeah, that is probably the most loaded question you've asked yet. But no, that is the most challenging thing to solve, right? And that's where us refining DiabeticU as much as possible really comes into it as well. Is like being able to create the ability to help make lifestyle decisions on the fly. Because there's a lot of things you could do, right? Being let's use the McDonald's slash Burger King kind of example. Everybody falls into that, especially being on the run, being on the go. Like just not a lot of options out there for healthier food on the go, right? I mean, just realistic. So if you have like today, I didn't realize I didn't have much time. I'm like, okay, well, what can I eat? And all right, well, what's around here? All right, so what can I do differently? So perfect example. I'm gonna don't kill me, everybody. I'm gonna throw out what I had today and how I ate it. So going to Burger King, right? Now, what is any burger at Burger King is high carb option, right? No matter what. But how can I reduce that? How can I reduce those carbs? How can I reduce that impact of what my glucose levels are going to be? So for me, 0-calorie drink. I did want a soda, so I got a Coke Zero. I got a Whopper Junior, and when I got the Whopper Junior, I actually took the bottom bun off, right? So you're taking off half of the carbs. Now, when I ate that, I had half of the carbs on the burger. I just had a 0-calorie drink, so the impact was a lot less than if I had went out and got a Whopper, ate all the bread, got a regular Coke, and got fries or onion rings.
There's a TED Talk about diabetes. That's one of the first things that you search up when you search on YouTube to learn more about diabetes, which we did in preparation for this episode. One of the first things that comes up is this TED Talk from a professor. I forget what university she is at, but she advocates generally that, especially for diabetics, but actually for anyone, carbohydrates are not necessary whatsoever. In your diabetic journey, have you kind of heard that yourself?
Meaning they're not necessarily you don't need to eat carbs?
Yeah. She completely advocated for a carb-free diet. And she even gave examples of like cookies made with coconut flour, for example.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the less carbs you eat, I could tell you that firsthand by, wearing a continuous glucose monitor. The less carbs you eat, it's 100 times better on your glucose levels. I think carbs are hard not to eat though, right? When you talk about that. So if I take you back to the very beginning of my journey with diabetes, my wife hated me because we would go, not really, but I would get a lot of, lip service every time we went to the grocery store because I'm trying to figure out what I can actually eat. And like when I first was diagnosed, my doctor was like, all right, well, you need to eat less carbs, eat less sugar. Right? That's the, kind of the main thing. And then of course add exercise and, the additional things that they did say. But going into a grocery store, I implore you to do this sometime. Just go and look at all the items that you're buying and find stuff that doesn't have carbs.
It would probably be very difficult to do that.
It is.
Unless you wanted to eat blueberries all the time, which I would love, but it's not.
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah. And so that's like, that's the bigger challenge. And as, as somebody living in the US eating just your regular average everyday things that you eat, 90% of it has carbs. So it really becomes difficult to have a no carb lifestyle unless you're cooking all the time and you're really paying attention to what you eat.
I actually didn't know that though. Like until we looked this up, like I actually did not know that you could survive without carbs. I don't think I really knew that. And there's the food pyramid. There's like the classic food pyramid. I know things have changed now. There's like the plate or something. But the bottom, the largest one is carbs. And so it just like, it's so interesting because, you think you're like an educated person. You think you've gone through and you learned about this stuff since you were literally in kindergarten. But things, change over time and perspectives change. And, maybe it was always like this all the time. You just think about like, okay, like what information can I really, really trust here? And I guess that segues into a pretty good question for you based off DiabeticU. Something that I knew your background, that's why we wanted you on the show, right? And, I trusted what DiabeticU was saying because I saw your background and said this is a reputable guy, his company has to be reputable, all this stuff. For someone that doesn't know you though, and someone who's just stumbling upon DiabeticU for the first time, how can they trust that the information that's on your app is reputable, and what types of things have you done to kind of get the reputation out to the point where it's like, hey, we are a trusted provider here?
Yeah. So that's such a great question. The reality of it is that I am non-clinical, non-technical, right? So what makes me qualified? Nothing. There's nothing that I have that's qualified to create this product. But the reality of it is what I've learned in life, you surround yourself with the best possible team. So I knew, that what we were building, the most important part was the clinical aspect, right? You're not going to build a platform that's meant to help people that are dealing with any type of condition without there being, heavy clinical background. So the first thing we did is we went out and got an advisory board. Our advisory board is, 3 certified diabetes educators, 2 registered dietitian nutritionists, an endocrinologist, certified diabetes educator. Certified physiologist, exercise physiologist, as well as a psychologist that specializes in diabetes as well. So we wanted to make sure that we had every aspect as we were starting to build this technology, and they were involved in the whole process. Every aspect of the clinical part of it. Now, my responsibility was to make sure that the technology was created properly from the user experience. And then I brought on my, our CTO was actually in the diabetes space for years, head of technology at a really big company. So we had the technology aspect of it as well. And my head of development was been in the fitness and technology space for years as well. So we made sure that we brought in all the right individuals to make a product that was not only from the user side, but also, backed by the clinicians as well.
So beyond trust for the consumers, you also had to get these people to trust you. So how did you, as a non-technical CEO, get technical people to trust you and join your vision?
Passion. My goal from day one has been to create a platform to help people like myself and my family not go through the things that we went through. My father had type 2 diabetes for 30 years. My brother's 15 plus years. I'm 6 years. I've seen every complication that you could possibly go through from, all the aspects of diabetes. And a lot of the challenges and problems that my family and myself had were because of those lack of resources. I wanted to create a product that takes, that helps people like us not go through that. And I feel that, once I, interviewed all the different clinicians or, people at tech in my company, they understood the bigger vision and they had the same vision themselves. And they, it's funny because from the clinical side was where I got the biggest response on this. The tech side, they were, all in. Everybody within our organization has either been impacted by diabetes or know somebody with diabetes or has a passion for it, which is, I love that. And I think that that's, one of the strongest points. But from the clinical aspect, I have all the clinicians we deal with, we need something like this. If we had this, it would help us with our patients so much better. It would help guide them through the process. And that was the buy-in that really helped us push and drive, to where we are.
Now, to follow up on that, or actually from your background, is DiabeticU catered towards type 2 diabetes with, the lifestyle? You said lifestyle changes can be more controlled with type 2, but where does it cater towards type 1 as well?
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome question. And the answer to that is right now, no. And I'll explain that out a little bit better. First part, was I was not and did not have the bandwidth to create the right technology for people with type 1, right? I've never had the experience, right? That's the first part of it. But the second part is our goal is to create a platform that gives a user the ability to manage everything in one place. We can do that right now with type 2, right? Are there, aspects of our technology that are beneficial to people with type 1? Absolutely. But we never want to mislead or misrepresent any community. So the last thing we would want to do is say, hey, like this is a technology that would give you the ability to manage everything in one place, when technically for somebody with living with type 1, it's not. It's a little bit more complex when you're dealing with type 1, because you're dealing with insulin delivery, all of the different, their Dexcoms are hooked up to insulin delivery pumps that actually work in tandem. And when their glucose levels get to a certain area, it actually injects insulin into them. So there's a lot that goes along with us that we would want to capture and be able to bring into our technology first before we are able to do that. So that's the reason that we decided from a strategic point to say, okay, well, we'll focus on prediabetes and type 2 to start. But what we are going to do is we're actually going to create a think tank with a whole group, and we've already been in contact with a lot of people within the industry that are also type 1, living with type 1 diabetes, that we're going to create that think tank that helps us now develop all the features for type 1 as well. So we will be releasing that later on.
I mean, I'm seeing a trend that you're someone who is very comfortable actually not releasing things until you have the right idea on what you should release. And I think that that's really important, because so many times founders are, just really running gun about their own individual belief systems and, wanting to address a market that is larger than maybe the one that they should at the start. And, you're using your lived experience, right? As someone with type 2 diabetes, you have incredible founder market fit, right? That's a, term that VCs used, right, to describe a founder who is a member of the market that they're seeking to sell to. And that's, obviously the most important thing, because you've been in their shoes. And that's something that I think is super, super relevant to your future here.
He has to, because it's health. It's people's illness in diabetes. It has to be carefully thought through. But following up on that, in terms of tracking, what planning have you done for data privacy and trust because of the tracking that you do on your app?
Yeah, no, that's paramount for us.
Right.
We follow, of course, all the HIPAA guidelines, to a T. But more importantly, our tech team, makes sure that everything is, super secure. Be frank, I can't speak on the actual terminology on it. It's just not my bandwidth. But that's something that we made sure of from the very beginning. That we're making sure that data is secure, data is not shared. In fact, we do reporting, so our users have the ability to create a report of all their data. Whether if they want to do a 7-day report, a custom report, up to a 90-day report, to be able to share that data with their providers, or just even see it themselves and see what that data looks like. The only person that has the ability to share that is the actual end user.
And so if you're thinking about that user shareability component, right? And like, people will want that data for themselves. However, they may not want a certain level of their own personal data, because if they have too much data and it's presented to them in like a CSV, that's too difficult as well, right? So how did you get around that problem of knowing exactly how much data the user wanted to see in these reports?
We don't yet.
You don't yet? Okay.
Being fair.
That's fine.
We just did it based on, when we were done with the development, we did about a 6-month beta test with 50 users with type 2 diabetes, just so we could really iterate the product a little bit better. And that, I think it was one of the interesting things that we found. When you're building something, it was, of course, me, non-technical, non-clinical, building a technology, which, I pretty, scaled technology for the first time. It was really interesting because, the one area that I never thought about, which I loved this aspect of it, was when you're building something, I know, since I'm part of the development process, since I'm in all the meetings, I know where everything in an application is. I know how everything works, what features we have, everything, right? So it's like secondhand nature to me. If I go inside and pick up the application, I'm like, hey, you can do this, you can do that, show you all these different features and bells and whistles. What was really interesting on our first iteration is when we put the product in users' hands on the beta test, there were certain functions that like people were like, oh, well, why doesn't it do this? I'm like, actually it does. Okay, but now I see the difference of me understanding it and then putting it in somebody's hands that you're not going to explain anything to, that's looking at it for the first time, how they interpret it and how, that user experience is for them. So we had to start making iterations based on that, and changing things around so that maybe there's a feature that was there, but they didn't know how to access it or how to use it. To making sure that we're working on that, and of course, going into that was one of them. The report was, technically we didn't even have the report. So based on the feedback, we started looking at, okay, well, what we want to see now. Where we're at right now, getting ready to jump into the market, we still, even though we have a platform that rivals 98% of the apps, and I'd like to say is better than a majority of the technologies on the market, this is our MVP. This is our bottom floor. So we really look at being able to get that high scale user, add in quite a larger user base, and then really starting to iterate the product based on user feedback. I think one of our main goals and what we talk about from our tech team on a regular basis is we need to get the product in the hands of our users, create good feedback loops, and iterate the product based on user feedback to create that product that the end user wants to see at a larger scale.
And people will need to sometimes be motivated as well to see their own information. I have an idea for you, Matthew. I'd like to share it with you.
Love to hear.
I would love for you to take it. Spotify Wrapped, but for your health.
Wrapped?
Yeah. So at the end of every year, it just happened last year. It just happened last week.
Oh, yeah.
Spotify gives you your
Yes.
Wrapped, right? We got Wrapped as a podcasters, actually.
Nice.
So we got our, so
Congrats.
for our first season, we saw that we were in 14 countries. People from 14 different countries listened to us, which is great. And we got a lot of other great statistics, 5-star rating, all top 5, really happy. Nevertheless, beyond that, the more important Spotify Wrapped is the annual kind of review of your music. I am not going to disclose who my top artists were this year, but I didn't expect who they were. Never mind. Anyways, Drake. No, it was not. It was not Drake. But I did have a couple friends actually that put Drake, that did have Drake as the number one, and they kind of blurred him out. People would wonder who it is because he's not as popular this year. Anyways, Spotify Wrapped for your health, right? People could see their health journey over the year, and it could kind of be something that could even be shareable, and people could also maybe even share their progress, right?
It's like the gamification a little bit. We've seen a huge trend of gamification.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what Wrapped is, like the gamification of making healthcare less taboo and making it more accessible.
And presenting it in a fun way, right? Like the fun part about Wrapped isn't that it's just like one playlist that you can just see for the rest of the year, which you can.
Yeah.
And it'll always be immortalized as your 2024 top 50 songs. But you also get it in this like really fun and entertaining way that is, it's presented to you with animations and it makes you want to share it and things like that. And I would think that people nowadays are actually pretty willing to share things, and maybe people overshare actually. And so,
But speaking about sharing information and monitoring, another feature that I was wondering if you guys have any thought of was, I think 70% of the tracking is done by the diabetic individual itself. Do you have any plans or features that you will potentially share the information, the user could potentially share the information to their family doctor or whatnot?
Oh, absolutely. That's paramount. And of course, that's, when we talked about that telehealth component, that's one of those shareable moments, but also there's a lot from the technology side where you can share what's called remote patient monitoring, right? So remote patient monitoring is when you have all these devices and those devices are now importing that data into the EMR, EHR systems, or just a system that is housing that data where it is monitored 24/7 by clinicians. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect as well, of course, what we talked about when we tie into the EMR, EHR systems. And just to explain that out, EMR is your electronic medical records, or electronic health records. It's essentially the same thing, just called two different things. But being able to transport our data directly into that, so that is feeding directly to any doctor that is tied into that network, whether it's their primary care physician, whether it's their endocrinologist or other care providers that are dealing with that journey. They're able to see all that data and make more personalized care decisions based on that.
could you make money off of those relationships?
Absolutely. And being even more importantly, the physicians can make money off of those relationships, right? So it's like, with like when you're sharing that data, the remote patient monitoring, there's CPT codes, which the CPT codes are coding for the insurance companies that show you, like, say what the item is and what the billable amount is for that. So it's like if I'm reading data that CPT code covers the physician reading the data, and then they get paid X amount for reading that data. So there are CPT codes for, quite a few of those different, aspects of the platform, like the remote patient monitoring, like visits with the certified diabetes educators and registered dietitian nutritionists. There are certain CPT codes that cover those things.
And so what features, you can pull it back the curtain, what features does DiabeticU have? If you could go into a bit more detail, and what features do you plan on releasing in the future, such as like the recipes, if you go into more detail, how you source that, the exercise, where did you hire a PT person to curate that program for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go into the recipes. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
What we did is, we're only at the beginning side of it. I think, right now we have about 500 recipes. We're looking to push that up to about 5,000. And we're in the process of doing that. Now, we're probably going to pull a good set of recipes, just because we get data sets of recipes that are all, for people living with diabetes, and put those into the technology for now to make it a little bit more robust. But what our goal has been is to really modify recipes so that they match lifestyles, right? So if you look at some of our dishes in there, we actually went out, researched all of the top dishes at some of the top restaurants around the country. Like, okay, what are the top dishes at? And we started with, all of your high-end restaurants. And then we went into like, some of your chain restaurants, and what are people's favorite dishes that they're eating at all these different places. And then we had recipes curated that just modified those recipes to make diabetes-friendly dishes out of those same recipes. So it's like, okay, well, if I am, eating, my favorite is actually, we just did a video on it, of the recipe being made, a chicken cacciatore. It's like absolutely one of my favorite meals. I can't really eat that often. Now we have a recipe that my wife's probably getting sick of it, but I'm like, all right, we're having a chicken cacciatore again because I can eat this and it's delicious.
Awesome.
But yeah, so we really focused on that. But from a feature set standpoint, one of the things we've really looked at, and you just mentioned, was gamification. Right, that's actually our next big move is gamifying the platform. I grew up on video games. I'm just a little bit younger, not that old yet, but I grew up in the era of the Xbox and the PlayStation and the Segas and all those things. And what you've really seen in that shift is that heavy gamification. So we looked at like all the different gamification models, like things like Fortnite and Call of Duty, and how do they gamify and really create that stickiness even on free platforms, right? I mean, you look at like what Fortnite has been able to do from a gamification standpoint, where they actually give their game out for free but make more money than every other game, right? So what are they doing to create that stickiness? What is that gamification aspect that really keeps people tied into it? So we're adding point systems and level up systems that not only tie into the different things that you do that add to your health journey, like whether it's logging a meal or taking a walk or the amount of steps you do per day, or even how much water you drink, different things like that. We're gamifying that entire experience to do two things. One, that the higher level you're getting, it's showing you how your health level is progressing as well. Because I'm doing all of these things that have points associated with it are all beneficial to me having better healthy lifestyle.
And gamification can also be a revenue generator, right? So you could have like a sponsored game effectively, right? That is from, some form of, really great chicken provider or something, right? And they could, get some, you could get some revenue from it.
Meal prep stuff.
Yeah, meal prep. I mean, meal prepping is huge right now, right? And like meal prep also provides you with a really easy way to track things, right? If you make something and you eat it every day, all you have to do to track it is just to log it on the app. Now, the verification of whether these people actually did these things is, I guess, a different thing. But in the end, you're just talking about a point system, right?
Yeah.
And if people are cheating, they're just cheating themselves, right?
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, though, like I really see like a potential for that there. Your graphics are already really good. So I think that that's something that, you know, you kind of would maintain that same level of design aesthetic and add on perhaps some animation, something cool. You know, Duolingo is like a great comp here, right? Like Duolingo has, you know, you talked about all these point systems, but Duolingo is able to gamify with one thing, the streak.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't think anybody actually knows how many gems in Duolingo they have. I don't think anybody knows how many lives they have left. But people totally know what day their streak is on. And when you lose your streak, like I did recently of a 500 plus day streak, you see a very, very ugly and sad Duolingo owl. Duo, this is the name of the owl. If you look on my home screen of my app, for some reason I have 2 Duolingo apps. I'm not sure how that happened. Apple, hit me up.
He was sad.
But there's 2 of them, yeah, and he is so sad on both of them. And yeah, when we're done filming the season, I'm gonna get back into that. But
Another feature, though, I think you could also take is the Peloton angle, where they have influencers. They build up their influencers. You could hire chefs, for example, to build curated, diabetic-friendly
oh yeah,
recipes. You know, if
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, and I think that those are great things that we will and should explore as we're starting to build out and grow. You know, for me, I'm heavy a believer in the influencer industry as well, right? You know, because that creates buy-in, right? I mean, you look at a lot of people, whether it's health, whether it's, you know, fun, whether it's gaming, you know, people follow the influencers and they have an impact. And so we really look to, you know, tie into that influencer network, whether it's health, whether it's the clinical influencers, whether it's regular people living with the type 2 diabetes influencers as well, to help expand our product and what we're doing, but also bringing that back into, we've been talking about bringing it back into our education, right? So our bite-sized lessons, having influencers that actually do our bite-sized lessons as well.
I'm excited for you, Matthew. I think your product is very good. I think you have a great app. And your issue, not issue, but where you're going to be able to really get this to the moon is through creative marketing. And it's difficult. It feels like in a lot of ways the difficult part has been done. You know, making the app and, you know, being able to create this incredible team that you have and kind of getting the technical resources together as a non-technical person. And as we've discussed today, there seems to be a lot of trends that you can hop on, like the Ozempic and GLP-1s. There seems to be the influencer world that could also become relevant, not just in providing, you know, greater access to the people that use your app, but also getting people to the app, right? And wellness influencers are so huge these days. I mean, absolutely. You know, and the definition of a wellness influencer is also changing. You know, we had a wellness influencer, Asha Walker, on this podcast, and she's locally based here, and she's wonderful. But, you know, Andrew Huberman is also a wellness influencer, right? And like the scope of wellness influencers is huge. It's not just exercise people anymore. It's not just chefs. It's people that are running this entire gamut. And your app, because it has so many things going on. I know I said before, maybe, okay, let's think about how we can get this into only being 1 or 2 things. But because there's so many things, it allows you to kind of operate in all of those worlds. And it's super interesting. So yeah, let's see where this goes. Creative marketing is going to be awesome for you. And if you're thinking about gamification, that's exactly where you should be. So yeah.
Speaking on gamification, we do have a little segment that we ask all the guests. It's a this or that. You could do it from your own preference. We're going to ask you 2 things. You choose one or the other or both or something else that you have. But for this purpose, we're going to do what you prefer or what's better for a diabetic to eat. So it's food-based.
Woo.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So first off, this or that. For a sweet snack, would you rather have a dark chocolate bar or fresh berries?
You know, I am in the middle on both of those. I would lean towards a dark chocolate bar because I just love chocolate. But I'm a blueberry person too. Yeah. Just like Houston.
I love blueberries.
I'll go with that on dark chocolate, but I have a dual answer on that.
Gotcha. For breakfast, would you rather have an oatmeal with potentially chia seeds or blueberries, or scrambled eggs on a avocado toast?
Oh, I'm 100% scrambled eggs on avocado toast.
For beverage, would you have unsweetened iced tea or lemon or cucumber infused water?
I would definitely lean on the lemon or cucumber infused water.
Okay. Why? Any?
Taste. Yeah, I there's something refreshing about infused water. Yeah, you don't get it enough, but
Yeah.
it's certain hotels they have some infused water in there, and every time I gravitate towards it, but I just never do it at home. But I think it's a lot to do at home because it's like, okay, well, are you going to drink it all, or are you just going to end up wasting fruit?
Yeah.
Never forget the WeWork infused water. That was the WeWork era. I don't think they do the infused water anymore. I think that was part of the restructuring, but I'll never forget the mid 2010s popping into a WeWork before the meeting. You got that nice cucumber, watermelon, mint, whatever the flavor of the month was there. And it set the tone very well. It probably predicted a lot of water trends, actually, that I'm thinking about it now. All of these like creative water trends, it all started there. Maybe WeWork was ahead of its time in some things. Yeah. Certainly not others. But
yeah, any water with some mint in it, I'm good. I love it.
If you were to eat a carb for dinner, would you have quinoa or cauliflower rice?
Oh, cauliflower rice all day. I am. Oh, really? If you talk about me, I'm a chef.
Yeah.
Not for real, but I like cooking. Cauliflower rice is one of my favorite substitutes. In fact, I had it last night. We did chicken, beans, and cauliflower rice, and I did a Mexican style cauliflower rice.
And for a snack, would you go raw nuts or veggies and hummus?
I'm a raw nuts person.
Raw nuts person. Okay, and very important, a pasta alternative: zucchini noodles or squash spaghetti.
Spaghetti squash.
Okay.
All day long.
Yeah, and for breakfast, finally, would you rather have sweet potato or whole grain toast?
I lean towards whole grain toast. That's another hard one though. But I love whole grain toast.
That's the end of this or that. Looking forward though, for your vision for DiabeticU, what do you have planned, or what do you envision DiabeticU in the next potentially 5 years, 10 years? How do you want to develop this venture?
So our goal would be from a technology side to have this so gamified that it's almost addicting to the end user. To like, oh, I'm excited to open up the app. I'm excited to see where I'm at. Oh, wow, look at my progress. Look at what I've done. We really want to create that user experience that's super sticky, but also creating better health outcomes in the process. And then, our larger goal is that we would love to, and where we're going to do is opening up DiabeticU total care clinics where they're meeting with clinicians, both in the clinic and through tele, and you really creating that hyper-personalized experience all the way through.
And so if we're thinking about the future trends of healthcare, right? Is there anything in your experience as a healthcare technologist that you think is going to become very relevant that people are not seeing right now?
I don't think that people are not seeing. I think it's in your face right now. Is just AI is just going to completely revolutionize so many aspects of healthcare. And when I say that, I don't think that it revolutionizes to the fact where you're talking about replacing clinicians or physicians. I think it's enhancing, the type of care that you're getting.
I would hope that it's enhancing, but honestly, Matthew, I would probably think that it's already replacing. If we think about all right, let's think about this in two different ways. First off, cost, right? The cost issue of getting, not just being in healthcare, but also just getting to a healthcare provider and, taking time off from work or something like that, finding someone to take care of your kids. That's something that's relevant. And then also the time. I would bet, honestly, that people are probably already using ChatGPT as a replacement for their doctor. And whether they should be doing that or not is a completely different option, but we might just have to adjust to a world where a lot of people are replacing their healthcare with AI.
Yeah, no, I see where you're at. I mean, I think that where that is right now is it's just essentially, is that replacing your physician or is that replacing your WebMD, right?
Okay,
Because
yeah.
if you really think about that, how many people are, end up, researching on WebMD and then they talk to their doctor and like, well, hey, I saw this and I saw this and I saw that. Well, and the doctor's like, yeah, well, I think we need to run tests first and really see. I mean, it sounds good, but
yeah, you definitely have the concept of like convincing yourself sometimes that something's wrong.
Yeah.
I had that issue even this summer. I really was convinced that something pretty bad was up with me. And then I went to a bunch of doctors. They're like, you literally just Google too many things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might be the case with ChatGTP in times as well. But I think that what could be really interesting, and if this is done properly, you look at part of the problems with the healthcare system in the United States right now is a major shortage in physicians, right? I mean, if you really look at the amount of endocrinologists as opposed to the amount of population that needs an endocrinologist, the shortage is incredible. Primary care providers, I think you have probably around 30% gap in actual providers to patients, right? And that shortage is just continuing because you have a large baby boom, going on, where you have so many people that are crossing that age of 65 and putting a stress and demand on healthcare, and just not enough physicians to actually handle that. So is there ways that AI can alleviate some of the load, and now, okay, well, you're able to do X, and that AI is accomplishing, these 4 or 5 things that normally a clinician had to do, or shortening the time of diagnosis. Like, okay, well, hey, we've already ruled out X, Y, and Z. These are the tests you need to run. And then you go with those tests first and see, okay, well, hey, well, those tests worked and we actually found out it was X. Or, oh, those 3 tests didn't work. Now we have to test more.
Yeah, another idea here that I think would be cool, especially in the context of like the current trends in venture capital and fundraising, is like adding an agentic workflow to what you're doing. So like agents, AI agents, like that's like the #1 trend in VC that people are seeking out for 2025. And for you here, you have so much data, right? And even if it's not going to be you, actually, perhaps you don't even need to be the agent, but somebody, an agent, a company that's building an agentic workflow could utilize your data, and you can be getting so much, you could just be providing so much value there. And like this also provides value to the end user. Forget about value for your company, but value for the end user, right? Like somebody is scraping the data that you have, finding the perfect specialist for someone who has type 2 diabetes. And it doesn't even need to be a doctor, actually. It could even be for a dietitian, kind of seeking that out in addition to the location that they're at and like the type of person and insurance that they have. Like that type of space is something that you should also totally probably look into here. That would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And if you, along your journey, we're curious because we're founders ourselves. Were there any challenges in creating the app space, a healthcare app specifically, that you found challenging along your journey?
I hate saying this, but no.
Oh.
And it wasn't that I expected them, but I think what my superpower is as a founder is that I am very thorough at making sure I surround myself with the best possible people. Every room I walk in, and when it's, in terms of my business, I want to make sure that I'm the least intelligent person in that room. Not that I'm not intelligent, and not that I don't have my strong qualities, but I want to make sure that everybody in the area that they're in is a specialist. So I think where we were strong is that when we started sourcing a development team, because we didn't do in-house development, we did external development, we interviewed about 30 plus companies. And what we really tried to find is alignment with our vision before we selected a company. The company that we ended up going with was absolutely incredible. And the reason they were incredible is because, just like I said, remember we said we did wireframing and we built out the wireframing. So we had a really good idea of what the product looked like in our head, when we were starting that development process. So we gave every company that we were working with our wireframes, long written out thesis of what we wanted to create and how it was going to work. And the company that we selected, actually, after the first, we sent over everything, they came back, we had a meeting. When we got on the meeting, first of all, they had 8, 9 people on the meeting. They had, people in the sales team, people from the product management, developers, they had UX, UI, they had everybody on the call in just your first meeting. And so we went through the first meeting. After that, they sent us an email with a list of like 35 questions. Okay, hey, we saw you wanted to do X. How is this going to work? What is this going to look like? Does this mean that? And so it was like, okay, wow. We had to answer all that, right? Every other company, after that first meeting, you know what they did? Sent us a proposal.
Wow.
hey, here you go. This is how much it's going to cost. So going back into the company that we selected, we answered all those questions, and then we're like, okay, hey, can we have another meeting? Absolutely. So we went through the discovery, discussed all those different questions, waiting for a proposal, thinking we're getting a proposal. We got another 30 questions. But what was really impressive is that all those questions showed that they understood our vision, they knew what we were trying to accomplish, and they wanted to make sure that they were as accurate as possible in being able to deliver what we were asking for. And so after that second, they sent us a quote, and they were right about in the middle range, right? We had some way higher that was crazy, and then some that were low. It was like, it was probably even too low. And then they were kind of right in the middle, but we knew that they were the right organization. Both my CTO and my head of development have done multiple, minimum between the two of them, probably 15 technologies that they've built. And they were, both completely throughout the process, just blown away with like, man, we hit a home run with selecting this team. They have been fantastic all the way through. And of course, every development, you run into road bumps. Right. There was nothing that was like, oh my God, earth shattering. Yeah, this is, we're failing, we're done, we're doomed. Mm-hmm. Everything was just like small. Okay, we needed to make this adjustment. Of course, the price was more than what they said. I think that's every time you do anything. Part of that might have been me too, making changes along the way as well. But man, I think we got so lucky with the team that we built, and the process was, very, it took, of course, longer, right? But as far as the process, was amazing.
Yeah, sometimes like it's a idea that client-focused businesses and their communications with like prospective clients, they should be like as brief as possible to kind of give the client more time. However, like I would disagree with that completely. Like if I'm you in this scenario, right, or if I'm them, if both of you in this kind of interaction, and you're both providing value to each other, right? Like the more communication, the better, right? Like especially if it's the context of creating something completely new. Like I would dislike, honestly, if someone was just like presenting this as like, hey, here's your golden ticket to the top healthcare app in the United States, right? And it's like, no, that's not how this is going to happen, And I appreciate what you said too about the pricing, because sometimes when you're evaluating proposals, like if a pricing is too low, you have to do more kind of research into where that comes from and why it's like that, because there has to be a reason why.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's has a loved one or might not have diabetes, how can they support your mission and the ones that do have diabetes in bringing more awareness and whatnot?
I think it's twofold. I think the first is encouraging testing, right? I think one of the areas that stands out the most to me is, of course, we have 120 plus million people in the United States that have either prediabetes or diabetes, but the percentage of people that don't even know that they have it is high. Right. So one, encouraging testing, right? And having people ask for testing, right? Say just, hey, why wouldn't I test my A1C every once in a while? I'm not, if you're okay, maybe it's not every year, but maybe every couple of years, I'm getting an A1C test. So that way I know, because the best thing that you can do with just any condition in general is early detection, right? The earlier you know, the easier it is to make modifications and changes. So I would say that testing is the first part of that, and encouraging testing. And that doesn't help our platform as much as it does just the entire community in general. And then of course, hey, any kind of somebody that has type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, send them over our way. We definitely look forward to helping as many people as we can.
And as you close, do you have anyone that you want to shout out along from your journey?
And where can people find you? How can people learn more about DiabeticU? Maybe you want to spell it out for them.
Shout out's almost impossible. I have so many people, that have helped us along the way and really helped us get to the point that we're at. Being that I was non-technical and non-clinical, listen, being fair, when I first came into the space 2 years ago, we started in January of 23. I think I went to my first conference in March of 23. If you'd have seen the looks I got in that first, conference, like, yeah, okay, whatever. But fair, right? No technology background, no clinical background, unproven, just started a company saying, hey, we're going to do all these great things. But sitting 2 years later, we're I would say light speed ahead of where we should be, especially coming from that background of what I have. But it all came from not only having a great team. So I definitely, number one shout out will be my entire team is, I would say, the best of the best for me, because they got us to such a great place. But more importantly, they have passion and they believe in the mission. But also there's so many people that helped along the way, just seeing, oh, wow, you know what? Okay, they're not playing around. They're serious about what they're doing. They're creating a brand, and getting involved. And, I have so many people that have helped, almost like quasi consultants, but not for any reason, but just to help. So impossible to shout everybody out. But that would be, I shoot them all out. Everybody, you guys know who you are. Thank you all. You're amazing. Appreciate it. And then the second one was about where the platform. We're definitely right now will actually technically be live on both Apple and Android this week. So you can download the app on Apple and Android. Help us as much as possible when you download it. We want the feedback, right? We don't think that we have the best product in the world right now, but you know what? We are creating the best product. And the reason it's going to be the best product is because the person that's downloading it, helping us get the feedback and helping us help you along the way better. That's our goal. Our goal is the best possible user experience possible. So download it. The more feedback you give, the better that'll be for us and the better it'll be for you in the long run. And then of course and it's DiabeticU on the app stores. You type that in, you will find it. And then www.diabeticu.com on the website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Matthew. You are customer obsessed. You have an incredible founder market fit here. The app looks great. I can't wait to be playing games on the app and logging things. Maybe there'll be a little, not an owl. I mean, our logo is an owl and so is Duolingo's, but maybe there will be another, little mascot that's going to come up one day. Who knows? I'm excited for you though. And I'm excited that in this conversation, we talked about how we're applying technology and marketing and bringing it all together for social impact. And it's not just any social impact, it's related to our health, which is the most important thing that we all need. If we don't have our health, we don't have anything. So I really, really am looking forward to continuing to following along your journey, Matthew. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Absolutely amazing being with you guys, and love the podcast as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.